StarCraft is an MMO. As the MMO that it is, there is plenty to be expected, particularly when it comes to customization, flooding hordes of players that rush every which way, hoping to accomplish an objective, make some money, or simply have fun at someone else's expense. We all have our own objectives and wants, and we need equipment to get the job done. For as many things as one could complain when it comes to StarCraft's world, the variety of gear to be found is not one of them. The sheer number and variety of accessible and inaccessible equipment paint a wide, varied tapestry of this exclusion zone's culture. There's a lot that you can tell about a man, where he's been, where he's going, and plans to do with what he's wearing, and this starts as early as the swamp, home sweet home. As of today, most newbies reach the zone upriver from the mainland, arriving in boats that always seem to bump into underwater anomalies, leaving them bedridden right before a grand adventure that'll throw them into a zone-spanning quest to discover the mystery behind the blue sphere. But people around here don't know that, or just don't give a shit, so don't expect a stout suit of armor to match your future feats. You get the same as everyone else does, which means you'll be partners in poverty. Surplus respirators, raincoats, suits made from scrap and thick coats, doesn't matter if they're not made from alloys and exoskeleton frames, the locals have managed to survive adversities, be they environmental or human. You'd do well to learn from their resilience. Something important to be noted is that larger names start showing up even this early on. The scientists over at Research Institute 7 are mentioned, but locals can't afford their gear, instead opting for locally produced artisanal suits or their abandoned project, the Aurora. At one point meant to lead development in zone protection, it was abandoned in favor of the AH series, which would eventually culminate with the RAPS suits. Local folklore claims that the now dissolved faction known as Horizon began working in tandem with the Research Institute as early as with the first Artifact Hunter suit, becoming officially subsidized ateliers. Red Shield, a company that, in contrast, mostly dedicates itself to combat solutions, are also mentioned, providing bandits with suits to match the Stalkers' Aurora, granting them a visual identity of their own, with protection to match. Not shying away from shady dealings, it is rumored even in these backwaters that they deal directly with Murmur, the leader of the Mercenaries. Gear here is mostly scraps from other, larger operations or specialized equipment produced by those who know what they're doing. Built for roles that have become niches of their own, diggers, hunters, artifact seekers, and skirmishers will grant you entry into their lines of work, with the same gear that they would use. And if that's not a good assurance on how effective this stuff is, then I don't know what is. It's fairly nice, actually, where once, in the swamps, you had to run around with what was basically clothing, disposable gear, or shit that was outright outdated, you'll see the Stalkers' will to innovate and improve. A local community, a productive village, what people look like tells you what they dedicate themselves to and how they actively support the group at large. A community of local industries. With greater purchasing power, more established industries are name-dropped more and more often. People can afford Red Shield suits outright, even if they're detritus from earlier mercenary operations. At first, uninterested in dealing with the zone's populace besides Mueller's posse, a higher-up by the name of Leibniz is credited with having convinced his pairs with expanding their market to the average Stalker. Something interesting to note is that, while armors in this tier for Stalkers are mostly produced locally, bandit outfits are provided to them in no small part by the black market, who seem to have a closer relationship with this rabble. They enjoy modifying Stalker gear to match bandit sensibilities. Where once the Aurora seemed to set the standard and future for Stalker equipment, it has been entirely phased out by the Artifact Hunter series. Developed in tandem with their subsidiary atelier, Horizon, these suits rapidly approach a new standard in anomalous protection and adaptability to the dangers of the zone. Of course, there's also your usual surplus and abandoned gear, now repurposed for local use after its disappearance from military inventories. Lacking in anomalous protection, they still manage to satisfy your local fighters' need to survive gunshots. The Bar. Our own little city-state, the capital city of the southern zone and the main hub of all major commerce that happens between Stalkers. With a deal struck that guarantees absolute neutrality between all factions within its walls, it is the last threshold for you to cross before you reach the northern zone, where major factions have carved out territories and struggle in endless skirmishes. This is where you'll get your first taste of the zone's most expensive luxury, shit made by actual engineers, where gear was once, mostly, thrown together bullshit made by local artisans who kind of knew what they were doing what they could with what they had. That type of equipment will get phased out by brand names and factory quality materials. Since you can afford it, Red Shield will finally open its doors for you to buy their gear, for as useless as it is against anomalies. Protection against mutants isn't exactly in high demand anywhere else in the world, for now at least, so if you're the type to pride yourself in supporting local businesses, mutant protecting gear is still mostly made by the area's artisans. As loot becomes more valuable, heavier, and you got dough to spend, weight relief exoskeletons also become available to those willing to part with protection in exchange for higher weight carrying capacity. Most of these suits used to be official military equipment, though high cost of production and military presence being reduced after the Night of Exodus means that there's plenty of these suits sitting around in warehouses, where then, mysteriously and with a bit of help from the black market, they are moved into your hands. The army, at one point, was interested in maintaining a far more active presence inside the exclusion zone. Perimeter security commissioning for the production of the Scythian line of suits, their increasing demands for better protection and adaptability being the reason of the platform's existence. On the other hand, working in direct collaboration with Horizon designers, Research Institute 7's development of the Artifact Hunter series advanced hastily as they sensed competition in ZIVCAS. Sadly, the RAP series faces a low point in its history, as during this era, its movement was made definitely clunkier. The pilgrim suits that can be seen in the zone being a trial batch, thrown out to gauge customer reactions. Still, not all roads to the bar are built off the back of readily available suits at your local arms merchant. There's plenty of people trying to make their way here as quickly as possible, and with the money to achieve such a skip, options abound from what's affordable, convenient, excessive, and even a few last-ditch choices that seem to fit better gathering dust in the back of some warehouse. ZIVCAS makes their first official appearance in the customer market with the cheapest options in the Albatross series, the Scout and Interceptor, both of these granting heightened mobility and decent protection for wealthy and middle-class zone residents. Artisans at this level have unprecedented levels of freedom. With the money, skill, and tools to fabricate solutions tailored to a stalker's needs, you won't find any lack in variety when it comes to the niches they fulfill and their rare, extravagant looks. From suits made for consumer markets to oddities that simply became popular due to word of mouth, those looking to fill their closet will not be disappointed. Of course, it'd be impossible to talk about equipment without mentioning the black market and their in-house products, which seem to be mostly relegated to oddities and mid-level gear. Not unlike Research Institute 7 is known to poach and take zone artisans into their ranks. Whether this is done amiably or not is up to debate. Not just a suit for the task, but a suit for each season, Horizon is known to have collaborated with the Blizzard Stalkers to produce equipment that can protect them from the harsh, deadly winters of the zone, lined with fur and Kevlar to keep them protected from dangerous locals and the biting cold. Horizon itself is worth speaking of. It isn't entirely clear what their role was in the zone's ecosystem back when they were prevalent members of it, but I will assume that they used to be a group of local artisans. Where once I claimed that their story was one-to-one, that of Clear Skies, it would seem that their fate is a lot tamer in this rendition of the zone. With humble beginnings with the CD 1 through 3, their work was famous for providing anomalous and physical protection at affordable rates for newbies, eventually drawing in the attention of Research Institute 7. The CD 4 has an error in translation, it would seem, since everything up to this point seems to imply that, given enough time, Horizon the faction became an official subsidiary working in equipment design and manufacture under Research Institute 7, becoming somewhat absorbed to work in the Artifact Hunter series. But who are Research Institute 7? Some of you might have noticed that I haven't talked about science suits for a while now. That's because to talk about that, I think it's fitting that we also talk about the largest producer of scientific suits in the exclusion zone. Mentioned in passing before, the true scope of their influence comes in full swing when we talk about anything anomalous protection. Having their fingers into what seems like a third of every single design in the zone, they're responsible for the entire MIS series, the Uranus, Reaper, and Saturn. Simply put, if something has the capacity to withstand late-game anomalous activity, there's a 90% chance that Research Institute 7 designed it and produced it, which is more than just a little interesting because, at least from what I know, we are yet to meet any individuals connected or relating to the group, working purely as a production house, and produce they did. There being an MIS suit for every single type of elemental damage an anomaly could hurl at you, the Institute offers a solution for every problem at prices accessible from the lowest newbies to the most loaded of stalkers without the time to put the work in. Constantly pushing the envelope in their standards and providing increasingly resilient equipment for stalkers, it wouldn't be a stretch to claim that, without their constant work and improvement, much of the northern zone would still remain inaccessible. Research Institute 7 could be seen as a more benevolent version of ZIVCAS, less interested in involving themselves with zone business besides just selling merch. If we were to call the zone a new gold rush, the Research Institute are the ones selling pickaxes and shovels. The final link in this long chain of growth, the north is the end of the road when it comes to upgrades, not the end of your journey or even a halt to the appearance of new equipment, but for your average local merchant, what you see is what you get. Don't despair though, for these suits aren't anything to scoff at. Where variety might falter, they make up for it with the fact that they fulfill their niches with extreme effectivity. These suits are about as heavy with story and lore as they are with Kevlar and servo motors, the Centurion's availability being a direct result of Mercenary Puppet, Allen Leibniz's presence in the Red Shield board of directors. The Mule is the suit which the black market built its success off of, and the Beast Slayer still proudly stands amongst all of these suits, showing that even at this level, zone artisans still got it. Demanding further advancements in zone performance, perimeter security had the Research Institute pump out the last of the CDN line, which means it pretty much immediately began disappearing from inventories and into stalker hands. The last of the Artifact Hunter suits also makes its end here, providing protection against everything and even life support systems. Reportedly, the only reason development stopped was because today's technology simply hadn't invented anything better. Catastrophes have a way of bringing people to religion. When catastrophe is bad enough, religion can be built off of it on its own. The Covenant is a cult led by Metropolite, which has its roots in Orthodox Christianity. As such, their gear sports Crusader-style motifs, crosses, cloaks, and hoods. They're a hostile group that wages holy war against all other northern contenders. As such, they're equal porch warriors as they are monks. While their signature colors are purple and black, their suits are a combination of black, white, and what seems like heavy rusting and deterioration. While less fitting their palette, this is to be expected from members of the cult. Metropolite, on occasion, has been shown to be the most level-headed member, despite being the leader. It should not be assumed that this deterioration is because he forces his members to not pay attention to their looks, himself sporting a fairly gaudy white and gold palette. Rather, it could be assumed that in local culture, wearing rusty, uncomfortable-looking armor is seen as something to take pride in, peace in suffering in all things after all. And if your very armor brings you suffering, well, that's just the most devout shit you can do, right? Violence is simply a fact of life, whether we want to or not. We would all hold hands and drink wine together if things went my way. But since life is not as simple as we'd like to, we'll be forced into conflict. What if you can't afford to get into conflict though? At least not with your own hands. Mercenaries. Blue, gray, and black being their colors, they've got a slick, professional, and uniform appearance that doesn't scheme on looking intimidating when it wants to. The leader, Mueller, is a man of many hats and knows plenty of people, so much so that this entire line of suits is provided specifically by Red Shield, probably in no small part due to their close relations to Leibniz and the board of directors over at the company. Don't think that just because they are mercenaries, they're all mentally unstable profiteers. While they certainly are, you can also add loyal as an adjective. A family in their own right, they all look after each other, lest their little band of merry men be thrown into a schism, as it happened during Siegfried's rebellion not too long ago. The zone is seen as many different things, most of them negative, which is why people who see it as a gift to the world should band together, right? This is what happened when Chatsky, Rice's leader, met Barashilov, and with him, the faction was restructured entirely. At one point, simply being a band of anarchists, junkies, thrill-seekers, and political dissidents, they've grown into a force to be reckoned with, not just in terms of numbers, but also in terms of objectives and capacity to affect the world around them. Now a group that fights for maintaining the zone free of monopolization and granting protection to any scientist who might want to join, they're the closest that the zone has to park rangers, advocating for its freedom and understanding. Sporting green and orange to give them a fairly organic-looking palette, they're what happens when you put a scientist and a guerrilla fighter together. They've got camouflage in droves, and when all else fails, they're more than capable of defending themselves and striking first. At one point, people might have thought them to be bombs to be kicked around by their equals, but nowadays, Rice is a force that manages to be as deadly as they are relaxed. One of the oldest groups in the zone, the only organization that can claim to have been here first is the military itself, and maybe the Trailblazers. Founded by Davidov, Godan, and a large chunk of the military that used to work perimeter security, a particularly intense mission turned them from simple rank-and-file soldiers into stalwart defenders of the world as we know it, during an event now known as the Night of Exodus. Mutants rushing every single border checkpoint leading to the outside world, soldiers died in droves, and barely managed to contain the beasts, realizing that the zone was a ticking time bomb waiting for the chance to strike against the world around it. Frontier now works as a doctor's scalpel, constantly cutting at the tumor that the containment zone is. Red and black give them a serious and militarized look, not surprising since they are actually known to work hand in hand with the mainland's military, the higher-ups back home providing them with financing, supplies, and gear in exchange for consulting, training, and doing what a random 18-year-old conscript would be forced to do if they didn't exist. Some of you might think that reaching the north of the zone represents the last and final step in this game's progression, and you're right, but not because you've reached the end of your crafting lines, but rather because this is where gear explodes in every single direction possible. There's more to this economy than just your gear merchant, and if you put some effort into gathering money, loot, or just simply get lucky, you could end up with new silks that'll have everyone around you gawking in envy and admiration. Providing alternatives to your dedicated combat armors, the Hector and SBA tank were both man-made solutions to a man-made problem. Produced by external companies at the behest of the military perimeter's forces, high cost and low utility meant that they never managed to become widespread in your regular standing army. More for us then, since their manufacturers now willingly throw these suits into the open market. ZIVCAS once again proves their advanced capabilities by providing most of the combo suits at this level, the legendary Albatross being their earliest and most famous design to hit the shelves. Martin by the Black Market and the Rigel by the Institute 7's designers also make an appearance, both of them being evolutions of previously existing designs, one innovating upon the ZIVCAS platform, while the other seems like another step in the evolution of the Artifact Hunters line of suits. But there comes a moment in every Stalker's life where it stops being about what works, you know? You've got the gear, the gun, the drink, and the brothers, but what do you stand for? Who do you stand with? What makes you different from everyone around you? Humans are predictable, especially when it comes to individuality and tribalism. This is where who you are and what you look like meld together, where style becomes a matter of life and death. I'm not sure if they could be called the most powerful, most advanced, or even the most important, but the Black Market is definitely the most influential and loaded faction within the zone's confines, headed by the Baron, who recently has taken to hanging out in the bar's residential area. If Lord doesn't state a clear provider for a piece of gear, chances are it's because you should be assuming the Black Market are the ones who provided the infrastructure, or got it into the zone in the first place. Loaded far beyond what any other group that operates out of the zone can boast, sporting golden highlights, mature wooden tones, and fine leather, they look like a walking combination between a gold ingot and a luxury couch. In a positive way, of course. Don't get it twisted though, they've got looks and money, but they are not soft. The Baron's reign over the marketplace being built off of violence and the monopolization of local artisans. While at one point merely dedicated to gear manufacture, the recent rising star and chief of the ZIVCAS board of directors, Adrian Evgenievich, traced a new path for the future of ZIVCAS development: direct intervention into zone affairs. A company with a shady past, they've got their fingers into just about everyone's business. Their organization, as it stands today, was formed by a combination of fucking up pretty much everyone in the zone in a single fell swoop, establishing a base for themselves in the Northern Forge. Despite their defeat at the hands of a mysterious stalker, ZIVCAS still maintains a relatively influential force to keep in consideration, in the battlefield and on the marketplace. Their gear is highly coveted, and with good reason. They're designed specifically for use and combat in this environment, innovating upon designs from ancient secrets discovered in the Forge. Some of their best gear is kept as in-house only, but whatever does spill from their ranks is worth keeping a really tight grip on. Where most people adapt to the zone at large, the Blizzard Stalkers look to adapt to its coldest reaches, operating in areas defined by permanent snowfall and constant sub-zero temperatures. Their modifications are utilitarian while letting you know just who they are. You know these guys well, and come every Christmas season, you become quite acquainted with them. I've come to call them Blizzard Stalkers, since whenever they come around, it's because soon after, you'll start freezing to death unless you get properly warmed up. Diggers who bring relics and interesting little tidbits from the ruins they venture into, this has given them a ritualistic, shamanistic look, sporting fractal motifs, snowflake geometries, pelts and cold tone highlights. These men seem to know plenty that we don't. A group that no longer exists, the Nord group's presence is still persistent in memory, confirmed to have worked under ZIVCAS contract as far back as 2022. Despite the lack of confirmed information beyond loose accounts, they've become legendary, if not for their mysterious history, then for their association with extremely rare, high-end gear. Their looks are popular enough that the Baron of the Black Market, noting people's interest in their imposing and mysterious looks, began producing aesthetic modifications in their style. Nord group gear is afforded only by the oldest, wealthiest, or most skilled stalkers, so don't go around laughing at them just because their visuals haven't been updated. What little info we have speaks of prolonged exposure to the inside out, armor overgrown with something that resembles otherworldly mold, carrying the prefix forgotten without any further information, as though documentation itself becomes an impossible task. If there is something to be shared among the stalkers who ventured into this alternate plane of existence, it's not ideology or employer, but the experience of what lies beyond. Boreal Stalkers, also known as marathoners, these men don't share an ideology or particular belief. What brings them together is the experience of almost dying for people's entertainment in an anomalous island that appears and disappears at irregular intervals. Participants of the Dead Man's Marathon event, a live-streamed occasion where you'll be dropped into Boreal and endure 20 minutes of continuous violence with the local populace and fellow stalkers, many men seem to have their mettle tested by the horrors they see. Most people return marked in more ways than one, modifying their suits to look good for the cameras, layering armor with explosives and ammunition. Some of them return hollowed out by the experience, and some of them simply find themselves begging for peace. Boreal stalkers share no banner beyond survival and what they lost in the process.
Отдыхавший на крыше дома сталкер Шурупов уронил вниз бутылку водки. К счастью, она не разбилась, так как ее успел поймать запыхавшийся сталкер Шурупов.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Of course, not every suit is backed by a corporation, a research institute, or an ideological banner. Some of them are born from obsession, from belief, superstition, and sheer personal intent. Utilized by groups too small to be called a faction of their own, infamous individuals, or simply requisitioned from brands that aren't popular enough to become named entities of their own, your style isn't just about showing who you stand with, but who you are when you stand alone. Fur-lined exoskeletons and helmets painted with fluorescent pigments made from anomalous materials. Messy and personalized, the zone is in no short supply of people who can do plenty to change its landscape with their own two hands. The Trailblazers seem so long ago. In terms of time and distance, where once they used to be the mysterious group that seemed to fuck things up for everyone, now they stand disbanded and dissolved. Rumor goes around that, among the many independent scientist groups that founded its original vision, ZIVCAS could be included, which is why some people take to painting some of their suits in Trailblazer colors, maybe as a way of activism, or maybe just because they think it looks cool. At one point, the easiest way to recognize a Murmur Stalker was by their snow-colored camouflage. Ever since their departure from the charted zone, they've evolved far beyond just camouflage to separate themselves from your average stalker. When SSPP forces foolishly thought themselves capable of reclaiming Pripyat from the decrepit forces of a cult that has since outlived their own god, they demonstrated beyond all expectation that not only are they not in decay, they are actively evolving. Suits with organic capillaries, visors lined with bristles that interface with the wearer's nervous systems, polymers reinforced with artifact-based alloys, and technology so archaic it can be traced back to the creators of the zone itself, the Neo Mind. During the assault on the perimeter, investigation proved inconclusive. Systems don't initialize, interfaces refuse synchronization, and any attempt at reverse engineering remains at the most surface of levels. Whatever it is that's happening in Pripyat, it seems to push the boundaries of modern-day technology with great ease, and while we fight to survive the zone, Murmur seems to be adapting to it, and the zone pays them in kind. In the end, Armour does more than just serve its purpose. It's not just about how long you've been here, how deep your pockets are, where you're going, where you have been, and plan to be in the future, though it's definitely about that too. Armour in StarCraft's Zone is a statement of your identity, who you are, what you participate and take a part of, what left its mark on you, and what you've crawled your way out of. Just by taking a closer look at any given Stalker's outfit, you can assume plenty about them. In that same vein, a quick look back will let them know exactly who you are and care about. So next time you're out strutting for loot, remember, a big gun makes you dangerous, but a nice fit, that makes you memorable. And in a place where we all respawn, that might be just as important, if not more.